What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to the Legion of Comics. I'm Mark, and today we're doing kind of a companion video to my previous one. In my last video, I kind of dissected a piece of James Gunn's most recent comments about DCU's new continuities timeline. So be sure to go back and check that video out. Now, his statement had a whole second part, which is standing out to me like a sore thumb. There's like a massive spotlight that's hitting the last part of that statement. So we're going to dissect that today and weigh in on that. And I definitely want to hear your thoughts and your feedback on it as well. Be sure to hit the thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get into it. As always, a huge shout out to Big Time Collectibles, JustinComicx cleaning, pressing, and submission service, and my LCS, ABX Comics and Games. They're all linked in the description of all my videos, including Pop's Attic on Instagram. Fantastic resources for this amazing hobby. Anything you need can be found down below. And if you need help contacting any of those, feel free to reach out to me and I can get you in contact with them as well. So let's get into it. The DCU is the most exciting thing happening right now. Obviously, DC Comics is crushing it. They are on top. This past week, Wonder Woman, or Absolute Wonder Woman, issue 2 was the top selling comic of the week. Justice League Unlimited #1 was the top selling comic of the week. The most anticipated projects are the DCU kicking off with Creature Commando in a few days, and then the big release of Superman, previously titled Superman Legacy. So as always, James Gunn is very active on the social medias, responding to people's comments and doing all kinds of things like that, giving us little nuggets, and we can only take him at face value. We can only take these things and believe they are true. And in Monday's video, I did a whole breakdown on his statement that he gave, and we talked about the timeline of the DCU. So like I mentioned in the intro, go back and check that out and weigh in on that. But this is for the second half of the statement today, and we'll go through the statement again right now. It's read: we're creating a universe that is like Star Wars, where there are different times, different places, different things, like a Game of Thrones, where characters are a little bit more morally complex. So the second half of this statement is what we're going to focus on today, where he says the new DCU is going to be like Game of Thrones, where characters are a little bit more morally complex. So I don't know how to take this, and this is where I need your help. So morally complex, morally ambiguity, whatever you want to call it, I don't know what he's comparing it to. First off, are we saying the DCU compared to the DCEU, the Snyderverse, is going to be morally complex? Are we saying more so compared to the comics that have been rolling nonstop for a better part of 80 plus years, where these characters have been fleshed out in so many different ways by so many different creators, all the way from Bob Kane on Batman to Frank Miller on Batman? That's as morally complex as I can possibly imagine. But if he's talking about like gray area with these characters' moralities, where you have characters like Superman that is the beacon of morality, the gold standard, what we can all look at and strive to be, the high watermark, there's really not a lot of room for moral complexity. Right is right, wrong is wrong, and that's what makes that character who he is and what he is. If you need a best example of that, look at Kingdom Come, which James Gunn himself has referenced over this creative process, but possibly for different reasons. So when I read that, I started thinking, are we going to do like another Snyderverse thing, where first off, I'm a huge Snyderverse fan, but looking at it, a lot of those morally complex attempts at characters didn't ring well with the fans. You can go all the way back to Man of Steel, where it all kicked off. Before he even put on the Superman suit, you had Jonathan and Clark wrestling with what responsibilities he has as an individual with these powers. He saved the kids on the bus, almost outing himself as having these abilities. And he had that whole conversation with his dad, if he did the right thing, if he should have let them drown, or if he should have come to the day to save them. Fast forward to the tornado scene, where Jonathan told him not to save him, to let him go, to protect him. It was definitely morally complex, but those are some of the most heavily criticized aspects of that movie. And then you look at Batman v Superman, where we get into the Dark Knight himself, who was largely based on Frank Miller's Dark Knight, which is, like I said, as morally complex as it can get. This is an older Batman, a rougher Batman, a Batman that wasn't afraid to break that famous code that he has, that no-kill code, which is super important. So much so, Tom Taylor's brand new DC series and All In reiterates it and really cements it as being like the gold standard for Batman. I know it's been broken a few times in comics, But in that movie, it shocked everyone, myself included. The first time I watched it, I was like, "Yo, man, he went all in." The Batmobile introduction scene, just ravaging people, like literally hitting people, flying out of the air and knocking people out of the back of a semi trailer. The whole scene just like beating people up in the warehouse, shooting the guy with a flamethrower. Like it was wild. That did not sit well with a general audience. When they think of these characters, there's certain things that stand out. Superman is the gold standard, the moral compass. Batman has a no kill rule. Those things, when in comic book form, you can explore them a little more because comic books are a lot more versatile. You have Elseworlds, you have standalone miniseries, you have time for the next writer to kind of correct stuff that doesn't sit well with an audience. And then looking at Wonder Woman, the best example of that was in the Snyder Cut itself, when she practically executes Steppenwolf in the end. He was defeated. He was missing a horn. He was beaten all the way down by Superman. And then they just happened to, throw him back through the boom tube. And Diana literally cuts his head off just to send him home headless. Like that was a no mercy moment. A lot of people, when they think of Wonder Woman, she's like this ultimate inner peace, emissary of peace for the world, bridging the Paradise Island to man's world. And seeing this warrior that takes that extra step, which makes sense to me. She's a warrior princess. It says it's not princess warrior, it's warrior princess. So it's not a big leap, but a lot of people saw that and they're like, that's not really Diana. She's a lot more level than that. But I don't know how much room they have for moral complexity, and liking it to Game of Thrones is wild. Like, I don't know how many people have watched Game of Thrones, but there's not a morally good person in that entire show. You can argue Jon Snow, but he has his moments, which is fine. He kind of redeems most of them, if not all of them. But morally complex, that's a rough one when it comes to these iconic heroes that are really like modern day myths. This is American mythology. That's what these characters are, and they represent and stand for things, ideas, themes, traditions, values that are bigger than any one of us. So that's a little scary. So I can picture that Amazon series that'll be on HBO Max that was announced at the beginning of all of this being like Game of Thrones. I could picture Swamp Thing being morally complex because it's kind of got a horror vibe. Check out the Alan Moore stuff. It's fantastic. But Superman, morally complex, I don't know. He's got to be that beacon. He has to be that unwavering gold standard of goodness. The Boy Scout, he can be a complex character, but morally, I don't know. I need your thoughts on that. Batman, I think you can explore some gray area with Batman without getting into the killing. We see that happen a lot in comics as well as the movies. Even the most recent Matt Reeves Batman, having to figure out what's right for the people that are a part of Wayne Enterprises. He has the responsibility of staff, of investors, of people that rely on that company, of Alfred even, that he's sacrificing what he should be doing with and for those people for his mission. That's a little morally complex. That's been explored, but I don't know. I think Zack Snyder's Snyderverse is amazing. I absolutely love it, but it's also over with. And there was a lot of it that didn't sit well with the general audience. And right now, moving forward, I think that it needs to be a clear, concise, very faithful to comics and spirit with what we do with the DCU. I don't think anyone needs to go in and watch any of these movies and have to try to interpret their vision of the creators like we did with the Snyderverse. Massive audience, massive following, worked very well for who it worked for, but I think we need to do something absolutely different and go for traditional modern, if that makes any sense. The essence and the spirit of these original characters need to shine through front and center in the new DCU, in my opinion. But leave me a comment. How do you interpret this? It's very subjective, very subjective. Be interested to see how this all plays out. I'm definitely going to be keeping up with it as we go. Be sure to tune in every Sunday night at 8:30 for At Week's End, where a lot of these topics will get discussed during the live stream. Come join the discussion. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the join button down below, become a channel member. And until next time, as always, I'm Mark, but we are Legion.